And I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. I was going to be R&D director of big multinationals. But I've turned into an entrepreneur. Before you innovate, you've got to be curious.
Yeah.
Like, how does something work? No one's given you a roadmap. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what the solution is, but you start building. And I reckon that when I think about the journeys of an entrepreneur, that's kind of what you do. And then, the first thing's a bit rubbish, so you take it apart and do it again. And you have to actually go underground. It was my experience as an entrepreneur. So there needs to be an element of the saboteur in you. You feel comfortable actually breaking the rules and actually kind of get a thrill from proving people wrong. Figure out what you care about, what you think's useful, and try and find something that you enjoy doing that is useful.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just have a favor to ask before we begin. If you've been enjoying these conversations and want more stories that redefine success, please do us a massive favor and hit the subscribe button over on our YouTube channel. It literally takes 2 seconds to do and is completely free. It's a small gesture, but it makes a massive difference for us as it really helps us to grow the show. And with that, let's get into the episode. All right, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast, and thanks so much for tuning in once again. Today on the show, we're really excited because one of my good friends, Aaron, has actually connected me with someone who is doing a lot of pioneering in a space that I'm super passionate about, in sustainability, and we're really excited to talk to him and understand more about his story because it's a fascinating one. And you've started some companies which one of which is definitely a household name. So really keen to dive into your story today on the show. We're joined by Nick Hazell. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
So Nick, this podcast is all about success. And so we need to start with a fundamental question. And that is, what does success actually mean to you?
It's doing something useful. That's kind of it. I mean, you get thrills along the way, but actually the fundamental is what's the problem to be solved? Is it a problem worth solving? And then solving it is a thrill. And at the end of the day, try and solve problems that are actually useful. And that's kind of been a theme. I didn't realize it, but when I was trying to unpick the innovation that I've been doing all the way through my sort of career, the things that were meaningful for me are the things that actually kind of made a difference. So that's success. You want to look back and thinking you used your skills to do something useful.
100%. And I suppose for us to understand the man we're sitting down with, we need to understand a little bit about your early context. Can you take us through like your early life and how you think, especially your childhood and parents, influenced the man that you've become?
So I'm a Brit. So I was born in UK, Banbury. I'd never lived there afterwards. My dad was in the RAF and we moved house every year or so.
Yeah.
In the end, I got sent off to boarding school because they thought that I was a bit stupid. And it wasn't. It's just because I'd been to so many different schools. I didn't know how to do much. But I actually did very well at school and got to Cambridge. Studied engineering because my brother studied engineering. And I like Lego, and there's really no more logic than that. And then ended up specializing in manufacturing engineering. And I got a sponsorship through Cambridge by British Aerospace, and so I went and did my first work after university in British Aerospace, making secret stuff. So we were a secret department making stuff effectively for MI5. That was my first job, manufacturing stuff. Taking apart Russian missiles and figuring out how they worked.
Every kid's dream job.
It was from a technology perspective, it was fantastic. And then what happened was I got a friend of mine got a job at Mars, and I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. I could do that, and I actually switched and I became a manufacturing engineer at Mars and a production shift manager, and I made Bounty, Maltesers, and Galaxy as a 23-year-old shift manager with 90 people reporting into me.
Wow.
And weird situation. It was Mars were recruiting people who were slightly off center who they thought might be future leaders, and they get them into the factory and teach them management skills. And quite a lot of the people who end up leading Mars were people who were my fellow shift managers. And so I embarked on a career at Mars, moved out of manufacturing into engineering, moved to Holland. And I've always been very restless. I think having a father that moved places every few years meant that I was never going to stay put. And eventually found my place, my happy place, which was actually in research and development. So I ended up as R&D director for Mars for Europe, and then I moved to Australia. So mainly doing food innovation, so doing things like rice in a pouch, Uncle Ben's rice in a pouch, and the squeezy tomato sauce for Master Foods in Australia. I didn't invent it, but we certainly made it a lot better.
Yeah.
And in Australia, it's still the only ketchup in the world where Heinz is not the market leader, is Australia, because of that squeezy bottle.
Is that right?
There's a lot of tech in there.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
From Mars, moved my family across to Australia, and then I had a choice at Mars after 20 years to go with Mars to the US or to Russia or to Poland, I think, were the choices as an R&D, head of R&D. That didn't work, so I switched to PepsiCo, and I headed up PepsiCo R&D and did things like Grain Waves and Red Rock Deli.
Really?
And a lot of food stuff. But the thing I'm most proud of in PepsiCo was that we halved the amount of sodium in all of the snacks without anybody noticing. And that's the trick. Of course, you don't have a salty chip to have less salt. So if we were going to halve the amount of sodium, you don't want to tell the consumer, but you do it anyway because it's good for for health reasons. And I got a chairman's award from the then president of PepsiCo, called Indra Nooyi, for delivering the 20-year long-term plan in Australia on nutrition and health and sustainability in about 4 years, effectively. So very embarrassing. Anyway, what happened was that they made me redundant straight after and relocated all of the R&D back to the US. So that didn't work as a career choice. Best thing for me ever, because it meant that I started on my entrepreneurial journey. Started working with UTS, developing a degree called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, which for me was a way of trying to figure out what innovation was all about. I knew it was what I did and what I enjoyed. Yeah. And there was no real book on how to be an innovator. And this degree was starting up. So I put my hand up and said, I want to be involved, and ended up being the first teachers on most of the phases of that degree, and figuring out as we taught it, to be honest. It was, we didn't really know what we were doing. Yeah. So I did that for 3 or 4 years, doing a lot of consultancy, went back to my Cambridge roots, became a fellow at Cambridge, and did technology road mapping for big industries, sort of mapping out the future of the semiconductor industry and mapping out the future of transport for various projects, including projects for the CSIRO and for the meat industry. And that actually led me to the first startup, which was V2 Food. I was actually asked to do a project to look at the technology in CSIRO that could be applicable to this sort of plant-based meat space. And the question then, which was 6 years ago, was, is this something? Is this a bubble? Could this be something? And could the technology in CSIRO be relevant? And so I did my consulting work, and obviously my conclusion was, yes, there's absolutely something. And of course, what they did is say, well, would I start a company? And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. I was going to be R&D director of big multinationals.
The accidental entrepreneur.
But I've turned into an entrepreneur.
So Nick, I think you gone through like many years in like fast, right? So we would love to kind of unpack and understand. But I want to go back to early days. Do you think this innovation, because pretty much your story is full of innovations, like your interest in innovation, right? Is that something come from your parents, or how did you find that innovation?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about it. I think it's just curiosity, and before you innovate, you've got to be curious.
Yeah.
Like, how does something work? You know, and that was, I can remember when I was a kid and we were moving to all these different places and I didn't know anybody, and I would just devour things like encyclopedias just to understand how things worked. And that was, you know, for me, it was really important to understand stuff and to learn stuff. And I think that was the sort of the original thing. And then someone was asking me about the Lego, and in those days, Lego wasn't kits. You know, now you can buy a Harry Potter castle with and everything, and it's just you follow the instructions, you put it back together. No, for me, Lego was a big bag of bricks. That's it. And you had to make something of it, which mean you had to kind of invent it. I reckon that there's something there about you got a bag of bricks. No one's giving you a roadmap. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what the solution is, but you start building. And I reckon that there's when I think about the journeys of an entrepreneur, that's kind of what you do. And then, you know, the first thing's a bit rubbish, so you take it apart and do it again, and then and that's, I reckon. And I sometimes look at Lego and think, where that's not the Lego that I did. It was just a big bag of bricks.
Lost its charm.
Maybe you moved a lot, right? So you probably have to rediscover yourself, you know, finding new friends, finding new environments. Like, so that means you have to go outside your comfort zone. Maybe that helped.
Maybe. Maybe.
You think?
I don't know. It'll just turn me into a sad and lonely person. I don't know. I mean, look, at the end of the day, moving different countries and stuff for me was exciting. Yes, let's get out of the UK. I knew I wasn't going to stay in the UK. Let's go somewhere else. Let's learn new languages. That was for me exciting. And I think that probably came from, you know, I was never in one spot anyway. So it was very strange for me to be in one spot. And then, and I do get quite antsy if I stay in one spot for too long. I kind of thinking, you know, there's something there. Is there something else? So that might be it as well. I think that if your life's really comfortable and, you know, you basically have the same friends and everything, I think it's quite difficult to put yourself into difficult position to
definitely. I mean, you have to rediscover. I mean, I find the same thing coming from nowhere, didn't have any friends. You have to spend a lot of energy and time to, you know, create that environment, you know. So you're going outside your comfort zone. That helped you to not just become an innovator, also like entrepreneurial mindset, like, you know, having it's a mindset change, right?
Yeah, maybe, but bear in mind, it took me 30 years to become an entrepreneur. So I mean, that wasn't my journey. But I was to be an R&D director or responsible for innovation in a big company. There's elements of entrepreneurialism, but it's actually guerrilla warfare is what that is, because the big companies do not want you to innovate. You know, they have a massive immune system. As soon as anything out of the ordinary that's not on plan, it'll get destroyed. You know, your budgets would take away. Why are you wasting your time? Focus is all about, just focus on the objectives of the business. Don't do little experiments that might fail, because that's a waste of money. Keep the machine going. And in subtle and not so subtle ways, it's discouraged. And even when they say, oh no, we're about innovation, you find that, your budget's gone or it's very much, you have to actually go underground, is my experience as an entrepreneur. So there needs to be an element of the saboteur in you. The people you feel comfortable actually breaking the rules and actually kind of get a thrill from proving people wrong. And that was, I did get made redundant twice. So obviously it doesn't last for very long in corporate, but it's that's kind of that's what you need in a corporate environment, and even then it's still pretty tough.
And you mentioned before that you accelerated the kind of sustainability goals of PepsiCo by 16 years.
Well, nutrition was the big one. So they had, I remember, their goal was to halve the amount of sodium, halve the amount of get rid of saturated fat, I think, and then get rid of sugar in the drinks. And there was some sustainability stuff. So that was they called it performance with purpose. So big companies have to perform. When we say perform, that's financial performance. And then what Indra Nooyi did is and got some stick for it on Wall Street. She was, some of the activist investors were saying, forget about the purpose bit. It's all about performance. But she stuck to her guns and set these plans out. And when I joined PepsiCo from Mars, which is actually a very values-driven company. It's a private company. It's all about the principles and stuff. And then PepsiCo is kind of on the other side of the spectrum. It's about performance, money, etc. I was thinking, why am I doing this? Apart from the fact I thought it was pretty cool to work on snacks, and I quite like potato chips. And it was because this performance with purpose thing. I thought, well, hang on a minute. The chairman and president has said we want to do this. Maybe I can help. And she actually came to Australia a few weeks after I started, and I said, you know what? The reason I'm here is because of you. Because if you hadn't done performance with purpose, there's no way I would have moved across from Mars to PepsiCo to do it. So I kind of felt almost duty bound to try and do my best to make it happen.
And how did you accelerate it so much? Because that target is
it's an invention. I mean, with all this stuff. Well, no, it's two things. So one is the salt thing was an invention. I mean, that there's some technology there which I think is patented. I'm not sure I can really talk about it, but basically understanding what makes something salty when you eat a chip. What makes it taste salty, and how does that work? And in understanding that better, we could play with the mechanism of the dissolving of the salt on the tongue, and create a much more salty experience, which we invented effectively. And that was, and the trick was how do you get the salty taste? Because there's no point in PepsiCo having a salty chip which tastes less salty and then lose market share to a company that doesn't do that. So it was kind of, that's always the thing. There's no point in being healthier or better or good for the planet if your competitor next to you is cheaper and tastes better for food.
Change the market share,
forget it. You'll just lose market share, and because no one buys something because it's new. You don't buy a potato chip because it's good for you. Let's face it. So again, that was the trick. And then the other thing, of course, was how do you do all that and make it cost neutral, or at least and actually make more money? And that's the difficulty.
Yeah.
So, for example, the saturated fat thing, that wasn't difficult technically. You can make a chip with palm oil, or you can make a chip with sunflower oil. There's a little bit of things you can pretty much do the same, but palm oil's really cheap and sunflower oil's expensive. Yeah. So, okay, you want to make it healthier, so you don't want to use the palm oil or the saturated fat. So how do you find the money? And so that one was around another invention, which was to do with it was actually a packaging invention that we did to extend the shelf life of the chips, not by any preservatives, just by making a better packaging, so that there was a better moisture barrier. And we calculated that would save the company a lot of money, because what was happening was that supermarkets would throw chips that were nearing the sell-by date away, and then they would charge PepsiCo, and that was costing like $2 or $3 million. We were getting charged for chips that were, 1 week before the shelf life, and we weren't going to extend the shelf life because it meant the chips wouldn't be as crisp, and that you can't do that. So we worked together with some packaging suppliers and developed a better packaging, which saved us a few $1 million. And I said, right, we're going to do this, but of those $2 million, I need $1.5 million to solve the saturated fat problem. And so what we did is we sort of, I agreed, and I managed to get over the line with the management team that we would do both. We would get some of the benefit, cost benefit, and we would solve the nutrition problem. Amazing. So that was an invention from somewhere else that allowed me to do something that was useful rather than just making money. So and that took 3 years to negotiate that, because it was you're not dealing with you're dealing with the accountants there. You're dealing with well, hang on, we can make more money, and say we'll do this, but no, it's going to have to be both for us to do this. So,
So Nick, I want to ask this question. I was actually very keen to ask this question from somebody. I think you're the perfect person. There's sustainability. It's a real buzzword in corporate world. Everybody want to become.
It used to be.
I mean, still is like still everybody asking,
how do we look more sustainable?
What's the definition to you? What's the real definition of sustainability? What's that mean?
Yeah, I don't need to define it. It's pretty well defined. There's something called the planetary boundaries. Living beyond the possibility to be sustainable within this planet.
Yeah.
you've got to stay within certain limits. It's been well studied, it's fully understood, and those are the planetary boundaries. So bad news is we're exceeded 7 of the 9 already. The only one that we're actually sort of okay with is I think ozone, because of the Montreal Agreement. We actually did some action on ozone, but that's what sustainability is. And of course, one of those boundaries is climate. But there's others. There's things like land use and biodiversity and pollution. So all of those together define what is sustainability. So the bottom line is that we shouldn't be doing stuff that essentially ransoms the future of our kids.
Yeah.
And if you live beyond the boundaries of what the planet can sustain, what you're doing is you're just creating a problem for the next generation, which is kind of borderline criminal if you just think about it. And I think more and more companies are thinking about it and will be held accountable. For when you're in charge of a company, you have a duty to all stakeholders, the shareholders, but you've got a societal license to do your business. And if you don't take sustainability seriously, I think that at some point you are actually going to be going to prison as a director of a company. And how you define that is, as I say, it's when the science has told you that this is what you need to do to make sure that the future is as good as today. And you don't do that, you can expect the people in the future to go back and say, well, who was responsible?
The reason I want to discuss this topic, I think is sort of sustainability word is kind of misused in corporate terms. I mean, everybody talking about, our packaging is sustainable, and our workforce is sustainable. Like, yes, but when you're really looking at overall, that's more of a marketing term than like actual practicing. I've seen it at times.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it is quite. I mean, let's face it. It's there is a lot of greenwashing that's going around. But the thing is that for a company, their job number one is to exist into the future.
Yeah,
that's it. So job number one, make sure you don't go bankrupt, and normally speaking, make sure that you grow and that you will become more profitable, not less profitable.
Business,
and then on top of that, you have to layer on other societal goals, which you also have to do.
Absolutely.
And, well, let's face it, being a CEO is not an easy job. But if you can't walk and chew gum at the same time, you shouldn't be a CEO. If all you can do is make money and you ignore all of the other things, you really shouldn't be a CEO. And I think you'll see the great CEOs that there are today. They're the ones who can hold different ideas, and they make money for the shareholders, but they also look after the other stakeholders, which is the rest of the society, and do something meaningful. None of them are going to solve it on their tenure, but they have to be able to do something meaningful,
make progress
towards it. And what progress looks like is becoming more and more defined. We have the Paris Agreement, we've got some goals for carbon. It's becoming kind of clear what needs to happen. And I know that when I was at Mars, when I moved to Australia, one of the things I was asked to do, which was for me my biggest contact with environmental sustainability, was organize a conference for the owners of Mars on what should Mars do for sustainability. So we got together all of the CSIRO scientists, and we organized a really good 3-day conference where we got the scientists into the room and we said, we've read all your papers. Now tell us what you really think. And of course, because when you're an academic, you can't say what you really think because you'll get shot. No, you'll get shot, because if it's not completely robust with all of the data, the job of the other scientists is to peer review and shoot you down, because that's, science is brutal in that way. But they have hunches, and they know what they're telling their children. And that's what they told Mars, and that led to not directly, but quite soon afterwards, an idea of sustainable within a generation, which meant that the Mars committed to being carbon neutral by 2030 something. I can't remember where it is on its journey, and there were various other goals that were set because they actually listened to the scientists, which always a good idea.
Yeah,
Listen to
it's
listen
rare
to the
though.
scientists.
And I want to go to your kind of pivot into your entrepreneurial journey. I want to know, in the early days of V2 Foods, what was it that, you had a successful career in R&D. What was it about the concept behind V2 Foods that gave you conviction to leave that all behind and begin your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, that's I like that. What was my report back to CSIRO? Well, first of all, the sustainability thing.
Yeah.
It really is a problem. If we carry on eating meat, and it's funny because it's not really an Australian problem, which is bizarre because we are one of the biggest meat eaters in the world, but we're kind of declining. It's actually, if you look at the rest of the world that eats hardly any meat, as they get richer, they eat more meat.
Huh.
And of course, meat is an agricultural product that relies on farming to grow all the grains and the soy and the corn and the feedstock that we feed our cows, pigs, chickens, and fish. And these animals are very inefficient at converting calories into meat calories. And cattle are, I think it's 1/25 of the calories that you feed the cattle. And with V2 food, given that the primary protein in V2 food is soy, and it's a direct comparison. You feed a kilo of soy from a kilo of soy, you make 2 kilos of V2 meat, or you give a kilo of soy to a cow, and you get 1/25 of a kilo of meat. So what is that? 40 grams or something?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So it's like, and if the problem is that we're using too much land for agriculture, and we are, the reason why the Amazon's going is disappearing is because we're planting soy to feed the animals that we are eating more and more of.
Yeah.
So that was one. Something has to happen. You've got to slow down the growth in meat consumption and actually reduce the growth in meat consumption and replace it with something which is cheaper.
Yep.
Because the constraint is money. If people have more money, they'll buy more meat. So clearly the solution has to be cheaper than meat. As nutritious, because you shouldn't be reducing nutrition. And meat is an important nutrition part of people's diet. And it's got to taste better.
Yeah.
And those were the three things. And to invent the technology that does that was the challenge. And luckily I knew a bit about meat. And the first thing I did when I did V2 was eat lots of meat to really understand what was going on with these burgers. What was that flavor thing? Top job. Because the first job was because Hungry Jack's was kind of there at the start. The first job was make a Whopper that tasted as good as a meat Whopper, that was cheaper than a meat Whopper, made all the people in the supply chain more money than a Whopper, but it had to be delicious. It had to have all of that, gnarly, greasy, smoky taste of a Whopper, and that was, great. Food innovation challenge. I can do that. So that was and we had some technology from CSIRO as well that we leveraged to do that.
And on that point, in all the discussions that I've had around the startup space, one of the things which comes to light is Australia is incredibly poor at commercializing research.
Yeah.
I want to understand how you went about commercializing this research out of CSIRO and actually turning it into a solid commercial model.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky in a way. The startup of the company. So I was the founder, but the company was kind of already had an investor. We had Main Sequence as a founding investor right from the start because they came out of CSIRO. I had CSIRO as a support system to help me on the science, and I had Jack Cowan from Hungry Jack's was saying, if you can do this and I can make more money, then we'll launch it.
Yeah.
And that's worth everything. I've got a Burger King. Effectively, I can say to the world, hey, we're supplying Burger King. And it made the goal really easy. It was, part of the problem with startups is you don't really know where you're going, what the direction is, and what does good look like. Well, this was very clear. If I can do that, but it was very clear to me also was that how do you actually create meat cheaper? And the most difficult thing in the food industry is probably running a chilled supply chain with a product with a shelf life of 11 days. in Australia. I mean, it takes you 4 days to get across to Perth. So it's like So one of the things that was important with V2 was thinking, well, how would our supply chain work, and what actually do we do? Do we make burgers and then try and run a chilled supply chain? It's like that would be insane to think that you could do that as a startup and then end up cheaper than meat. So it was very clear from the start that we would use the meat industry as part of our solution, which was something that was open to me because I'm not a vegan.
Yeah.
Not open to a lot of people doing plant-based meat stuff because actually they were vegans. And if you define the problem as those bastards who are involved with meat, then you're never going to work with them. But I never saw it that way. I was thinking, well, the job to be done is reduce the amount of meat being consumed. And if the meat industry can help me, because they've got the factories, they've got the supply chain, why not? And that actually, other people do that now, but I think we were the first to say, well, use them. Why not? And as long as they make more money than they do from meat, then they're very happy to help me. But what was interesting with V2, and this was the journey, it was very clear, do something for Australia, expand it out in the developed markets, but also at the same time figure out how to do developing markets, because that's the problem to be solved. And the numbers are so, I mean, if you look at China, what's happened to meat consumption in China over the last 50 years. When I first went to China, when I was like 22, meat consumption would have been 5 kilos per person per year. And a lot of people hardly had ever eaten meat in the Hunger Years. Now China is, well, I was going to say 45, but it's now 50 kilos per person per year.
Wow, so
and Hong Kong, 135 kilos. So if you want to know what happens when China gets really rich, look at Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is actually the biggest meat eater in the world. It's even more than Australia, which is number 2. And so you could see if India does that, and if Africa does that, you say goodbye to the Amazon. It's gone. That's we need every bit of land to grow the soy to feed the animals that we're going to be eating, and that you can't not try and solve that problem. That's a problem that needs to be solved.
Thankfully, Indians are more vegetarian by religion, which is...
It's funny. There's lots of academic work on here, and there is a straight line relationship between GDP and meat consumption. Absolutely straight line. And India is just a little bit under, but it's not much under. I tell you, it's not much. And every Indian I know, take them out of the context of India, biggest meat eaters in the world. They are, absolutely. And to be honest, in rich Indians, find a way of eating meat.
Right.
And it's kind of one of those, isn't it? And look, it's just, we're human. Meat is delicious. We get a nutritional payoff. You have to work pretty hard to be a vegan.
In summary, going back to responsibilities, as a responsible human, you should become a vegetarian.
You should reduce your meat, particularly your red meat. Yeah, absolutely. You should do. But again, one of the things that the fossil fuel industry did really well, I mean, well as in terrible, but they did it really well, was to move the narrative from we're supplying all this fossil fuel and industry is destroying the planet, to what's your carbon footprint? And then suddenly the onus is not on them, it's on us. My carbon footprint, I've got to reduce my carbon footprint. So, I'm a little bit I don't like a narrative which puts the onus on people and say, well, it's your fault that the planet's
shifting the blame.
Yeah, it's shifting the blame. So I tend not to try and talk about, individuals' responsibility. It's businesses, governments, they hold the big levers. Of course, individuals. And if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, there's a few things you should be doing. Change your diet, number 1. Stop flying. Which, welcome to Australia. How are you going to do that? Electrify everything. And probably consume less, just consume less. Because, obviously consumption, everything that you consume has a carbon footprint. And if you consume less, but again, we're humans, it's like, have a horrible life and then it's good for the environment. No, you can't do that. We like to consume. And that kind of brings me to like Algenie, this idea that you can make everything from CO2, all of your plastics and your polymers and your clothes and whatever. Imagine a situation where the more you consume, the better it is for the planet.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's better for the economy. You know, imagine a politician saying, "Hey, we're about the planet. We're going to reduce the GDP per capita by 15%." It's like, how long are they going to last? It's like a CEO saying,
That's it.
"I'm going to have a profit freeze for the next 10 years because we're going to look after the planet."
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, we live by some rules. We live in a capitalist world. We've got to grow. We've got to make money. And then the innovation job is how do you be sustainable in that environment?
Yeah.
And that's kind of this is what we're playing with Algenie. It's like, well, how do you make everything from CO2, all the petrochemistry, but do it in a way that everyone makes more money or less, not
still achieve your goals without harming the planet.
Yeah. That's the mission. And to be honest, if we don't succeed, we have a bit of a problem because I don't see any way of doing it unless we can grow economically because every bit of society is geared around growth and profit and consumption. It's kind of that's what humans
100%.
do.
And before we get to Algenie, I want to go back to V2 because there's one big thing which I think I find as an inhibitor is, you know, public perception. I want to understand how you tackled that, especially in a huge meat-eating country like Australia, trying to overcome this perception of plant-based meat.
Yeah. I can remember, it's funny, it's in the news, isn't it, that Europe has banned the words burger and stuff related to plant-based. And we had the same in Australia.
Remember,
there was a Senate inquiry and I had to front up in Canberra and, you know, basically just present the facts that there is no consumer in Australia has ever been confused by the naming of a plant-based burger or a plant-based sausage, you know, and of course there is no consumer confusion. It's just a play by the meat industry to try and get the stuff off the shelves and get it into the vegan ghetto and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't think we have overcome the public perception particularly. I think that the meat industry has done a great job in promoting the greenness. You know, you don't see a picture of a cow in a feedlot, do you? When it's sitting in green pasture having the time of its life, isn't it? So I think that and let's face it, when I started V2 Food, I thought, well, we're going to get to 10% of meat, and I'll give it 5 years. You know, that we will solve it. And the reality, it hasn't happened. You know, and there's a combination of things there. Someone was asking me recently about why I thought it wasn't going. There was a big crowd going into plant-based meat, and to be perfectly honest, there were a whole lot of products out there that were really horrible. And then what happens is that people taste plant-based meat. They can't remember what brand they tasted, but they taste, oh yeah, I had that plant-based meat. Horrible. And that means that they will not revisit the category. And that was what we were fighting against in the early days. It was so many players with stuff that really tasted awful, particularly for meat eaters who are switching from really delicious meat, and then they're going to try, I'll try this. And they go, and that really meant that the category didn't grow. And but what you're seeing now, and you're seeing this around the world, is that the category has thinned out a lot. And the ones that kind of taste better and some of them taste delicious. I think V2 tastes delicious. There's really, I eat V2. There's no compromise. And there's things like Impossible is also delicious. What's going to happen is people will slowly revisit the category for one reason or another. Maybe their daughter's a vegan or something, or they're having a barbecue and someone's coming, and they'll go, oh, actually, that's not too bad. I quite like that. And then it's going to start to grow again. So we're in this classic sort of boom. People crowd in, load of dodgy products, goes down. Everyone is disinterested, starts looking the other way. And while they're looking away, they notice it's growing, and then it accelerates. So I think it'll get there.
But you see a right trend going.
It's V2's growing.
Okay.
And the category is thinned out. I have noticed recently that it's kind of been moved out of the meat aisle and has gone to the vegan space, which was never the intention. We wanted to be in the meat aisle. So I guess there's some pressure on the supermarkets to that territory that's owned by the meat industry. Take those vegan products out of the. But look, it does mean that the vegans can find it easier. So I don't think sales have suffered from what I understand.
Okay.
And I want to go to your shift to Algenie. I want to understand, was there an aha moment? Like what triggered the change to Algenie?
Well, it started at V2 Food. One of the bits of tech that we were looking at when I was doing the consultancy work was there was a whole hype about Impossible and the heme. They had the red color, and cooking meat, having a temperature time indicator is actually really important because meat flavor is a chemical reaction which happens during cooking.
Yeah, and
no one really thinks about it, but that's what happens. And if you don't have a temperature time indicator, you don't know when to stop cooking. You end up burning it, or you cook it too little. And so having a red color that changed with temperature was really important. And we'd solved it with an algal pigment and patented it, and that was great. We had the patents. We were the alternative to Impossible. But then I discovered that the cost of growing algae was so expensive that I couldn't afford to put the pigment into the product.
Wow.
And then I was thinking, well, how come it's so expensive? It's just algae grows in my swimming pool. It must be easy to grow.
Yeah.
And then it forced me to go and understand what the economics of growing algae and solve it for V2. And that then opened my eyes to well, what are the economic problems in growing algae, and what would need to be solved in order to grow algae really cheaply? And we didn't need to be that cheap to make a pigment, because actually pigments are really expensive. But if you take it forward and think, well, actually with algae you can make all sorts of things. You can make plastics, and it's basically oil. Crude oil is old algae. If you could get the cost down phenomenally, like 10 or 20x, then you could do all of this stuff. And I had that thought about how could you do that. And didn't do it at V2, but when I left V2 and I was on gardening leave, at the end of the gardening leave, I had a really good idea on how that might happen. And working with UTS, we invented this thing called a helical photobioreactor, which solves the two major problems of growing algae. And I'll tell you what they are. When you grow algae, it shadows itself. So, it basically, as it grows, it blocks out the light. Without light, algae can't grow. So algae can't grow very well. So how do you get light to all of the algae cells so they can bloom? And we hear about algal bloom. Well, if you give algae everything it needs to grow, it grows like hell. So that was one problem. So we solved that with a sort of a thin layer of algae. So we have a very thin layer with light coming top and bottom. I'd have to draw it for you to understand, or just go on the website and you'll see what we're doing. And then so it's called a helical photobioreactor. And then the next problem was, how do you get the cost of photobioreactors down a factor of 50 effectively? Right. Because at the moment, just the cost of the photobioreactor is going to bring the cost per kilo way too high. And so how do I make a helix really cheaply? And to make plastic really cheaply, there's what you do is you extrude it. You can plastic injection mold it, but there's no way you could plastic injection mold a multi-level helix. It's just unthinkable. But you could extrude it. And so I thought, well, I know how to make helices on an extrusion. That's Spirelli pasta. I'd made pasta before. That's a helix.
Wow.
So how difficult could that be? And so I said, well, I can solve it. And I got some seed money, and then I did my first trial on an extruder. First of all, I found an extruder company that would work with me. Most of them said, no, you can't actually do it. And I thought, well, I've made pasta. Of course I can do it. So I found an extruder company that was willing to work with me. And we did a trial. And of course, it didn't work at all. So I kind of gone out there and said that we can do this. So I had to completely retool an extrusion line to figure out how to do a helix. And now I think I published photos on what we're doing. We can do a perfect helix off an extruder, and that is the cheapest way of molding plastic. So I can create this photobioreactor that is insanely productive for a bit more than the cost of the plastic that goes into the extruder. So I don't know. I suppose the short story is that because I was too stupid to know that it wasn't possible. And then I'd gone out there and said that it was, and then I had to had to find a way. But the upshot is that we think we can bring the cost of the photobioreactors down by orders of magnitude, and that's the dominant cost for growing algae. So that's what V2 is doing, and we're 2 years on the journey.
Okay.
The first year was trying to figure out how to actually do an extruded helix. But we're now growing algae. We're selling photobioreactors to universities around the world and getting them excited at the possibility that this algae could be the next biotech industry. If we're cheaper than yeast and bacteria, we don't use any land. We don't use sugar, which is an agricultural product. So,
So these are pretty much produced in a laboratory sort of thing?
We're at lab scale at the moment.
Yeah.
But we've just did a run yesterday. We did 50 revolutions, and for me, a scale up is 100 revolutions. So we're really close.
Wow.
And we can now run continuously. So basically, we can just extrude this helix, and it just keeps going. It's very difficult. This is not. I don't want to trivialize the work because it's insanely difficult, but we're doing it. And again, it's another patent. So we've patented not only the photobioreactor, but the means of production of a helix on an extruder. And that is so cool. I mean, if you're a manufacturing engineer, I'm going right back to my roots as a manufacturing engineer. This is the coolest manufacturing you can imagine.
I love that the idea came from pasta. That's just like so incredible.
and pasta is a helix, but it's just one thing is a helix which is this big and micrometer perfect surfaces with optical features and walls and everything, and fusilli. So how I could think it was trivial problem.
That's incredible. And I want to share with our listeners some of the potential use cases for algae, because people might be listening going, great, algae, so what?
Yeah, algae is a problem. Yeah, it's a algal bloom, toxic bloom. Algae, so when I say algae, it's algae and cyanobacteria, just in case there's a biologist listening. They're different, they're completely different things, but actually from our perspective, they're the same. They're microorganisms that absorb light and CO2 and grow. That's what they do. And then there's million species of algae out there, of which we only have characterized 500. So there's just enormous diversity and extremophiles in strange places. So you can pretty much make within algae and cyano any bit of organic chemistry. And I like to think of it as it's like crude oil, because actually crude oil is old algae. That was algae that was laid down, a million years ago. Mm-hmm. It's kind of matured a bit. There's a bit of pressure and temperature in there, but basically it's old algae. And so what can you make from algae? Well, everything you can make from crude oil. So everything. And then on top of that, you can do things like, what do fish like to eat? Well, they like to eat algae, so fish feed, proteins, pigments. Algae is the best way of producing pigments. So if you want to have natural pigments, algae make all the.
Can you feed animals? So you can
feed animals. I mean, already a lot of if you're feeding fish, you need to give it things like omega-3s. Otherwise, your fish isn't healthy. Omega-3s come from algae, or they come from fish. So at the moment, it's what goes into fish meal for the fish farms, which most of the fish we eat come from fish farms. A lot of that is bycatch, which has been ground up, and that gets fed to the fish. So not sure whether that's totally sustainable, and there's not a lot of fish left in the sea. So there's a big opportunity for algae to supply the ingredients that go into that industry. At the moment, algae is used. There is a couple of $1 billion industry for algae today, but it's mainly things like cosmetics, antioxidants, nutraceuticals. There's a whole lot of stuff in that space. And the reason is because algae is so expensive to produce. The only thing that you can actually do is those very high value sectors. But if you can bring the cost down, then you can start doing things like bioplastics. And imagine if your bioplastic, so an example would be something called PHA. And I've read a paper somewhere that says that about 70% of the plastics that we use, all of the plastics we use, from PVC and polyethylene and polypropylene, all of those plastics, the functionality could be replaced by PHA. which you can make from algae.
Wow.
And if you can do that at, $2 or $3 a kilo, which is where, plastics range from $2 a kilo to $5 a kilo, depending on the sort of plastic. If you can do that from algae, then for every kilo of plastic, you've sucked down from the atmosphere a kilo of CO2. So your plastics effectively have embedded CO2 in the plastic. And we actually do use gigatons of plastics. Wow. So imagine a world where all of your plastics, all of your Lego is made out of CO2. Wow. And it means that you can use more of it. There's no reason why you shouldn't use plastic. It raised some absolutely mind-bending questions about what do you do with your plastics and your polymers. And imagine your clothes. We want to buy our clothes at Zara and wear them for 3 days and then throw them away. Do it. Big problem, because it's made from a polymer which is made from algae, which is effectively it's made from CO2. So imagine all of your polymers are made from CO2. What do you do at the end of use? Don't know. It's a question. Yeah. I know there's only one thing to do. You don't recycle it, because you take that CO2 embedded and you put it in a hole in the ground. And and then it's like, how can landfill be sustainable? But just think about it.
Yeah, I mean,
we've got gigaton-sized holes in the ground in Australia, managed by miners that have infrastructure to take gigatons of ore at a very low value. The actual ore itself, we're talking about dollars per ton, $10, $20, $100 a ton. All of the infrastructure to move it to the ports, take it out of the ground, all of that. Our miners could become reminers. So that all of this embedded carbon in the plastics and the polymers and the things that we make from algae could end up being remined back into the ground and looked after for the next million years, and until some dumb ape arrives and says, "Oh, that's good, let's burn it." Yeah. But it's that sort of thinking, because again, the IPCC has told us, we've got to be sucking up, 10 gigatons of CO2 by 2050, just to stay within 2 degrees or something, which is going to be terrible. And the biggest projects in the world don't even do 1 million tons, let alone a gigaton. Wow. So how's that going to happen? Yeah. So again, go back to it's not going to happen if we don't have an economic reason for it to happen. Maybe this is the thing that we can do that will give us an economic reason to be sustainable. And wouldn't it be ironic that the miners become the heroes? Wouldn't that be a beautiful
But I think it's a great solution, because at the end of the day, a lot of what this argument is about is they don't want to shut down the mines because there's so many jobs there. So if you can upskill them,
they make more jobs.
Exactly. So if you can remine them, then
and you know what, they make money twice.
Exactly.
Dig a hole, fill a hole,
yeah.
And it's all the same skills. And I'm trivializing it, of course. It's insanely complicated, etc. But you need to understand the geology. Yeah. You need the infrastructure. You need big machines. You gotta not worry about things like millions of tons. So they don't worry about millions of tons. They do that every week. And you got to make sure that you look after it. You got to have stewardship so that it stays stable. Good news is that plastics are very stable. I know, because I was R&D director for Smiths. Plastics don't break down as long as you don't give them, an environment where they do break down. So I find that it's not the core idea for Algenie, but you kind of think, well, there may be a future that might actually. There's
so many downstream effects I see from the work you're doing at Algenie. There's so much downstream impact that can happen
and our job is get the cost of producing algae cheap. And we think there's going to be hundreds of startups, biotech startups, because the biotech tools are so insanely good nowadays. Anybody in a garage and a half a degree can start doing biotech on a E. coli or a cyanobacteria in our case, to produce an interesting bit of chemistry which they can now sell cheaper than the synthetic alternative potentially. And we think that, you know, that could be a whole new biotech industry that ultimately will replace the petrochemical industry.
But to still manufacturing of these things, you still need energy, right?
You do a lot of energy. So the LEDs that give the light to our algae will be fed with renewable energy, and we need a lot. So this is not something that I didn't really talk about. What do you need? You need carbon dioxide, you need some nutrient, and you need a lot of renewable energy. And good news is renewable energy is abundant. You know, we have as much renewable energy as we want. We just, you know, particularly in Australia, we have a wonderful opportunity here, and it's incredibly cheap. And so it's the right moment in time. Now is the time where the cost of renewable energy is cheap enough that the sort of cost targets that we're going after, which is the sort of $1 a kilo, a few dollars a kilo, they're within reach. The marginal cost of renewable energy today is low enough for us to get to those sorts of numbers. So wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but it's getting cheap, and it's actually getting cheaper. So who knows where the end game is, but you can see that we might have an economic reason to be to make all of our stuff out of algae.
Yeah, and like we saw hydrogen get really hyped up. Do you think there's ever a potential where algae could be like an export for Australia?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, I think so. But also, again, not just Australia. I mean, it'd be nice to think that Australia can save the world and everything's going to be made in Australia, and we're going to be the biggest economy in the world. And look, yeah, in theory, yes, we've got so much land, so much sun. We could, you know, I can remember as a young engineer, I was calculating how much of Australia would you need to convert to photovoltaics to create all the energy in the world. It wasn't very much, you know. It was about half the area of Tasmania plonked in the middle of Australia. It's insane. Of course, you could do it, but it would cost you a few trillion in capital to do it. So Australia could be part of the solution. I think we could export bio crude, if you like, in the same way that we export other things. But we could also add value, you know. So why don't we, for the first time in our economic history, actually try to add value? You know, we've got the universities. We could add value in Australia. But, you know, I'm not sure we're going to change how Australia operate. We still like to dig things out of the ground and sell them off. And in this case, we might produce biocrude and sell them off to people who know how to refine them and turn them into the chemistry we want. And that's legitimate as well. So I'm agnostic. I think that anyone with cheap renewable energy will be growing algae in the future. So that could be Middle East, North Africa, China, obviously. Strange places like Iceland and Norway have cheap energy. But that's going to be, it's the people with the cheap energy will be the oil states of the future.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I want to know, like, you've had a corporate background and then now you're working in startups. How has your leadership style had to change to kind of adapt to those different settings?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I know when I did V2, I gave it a lot of thought. I thought, well, okay, what were the best companies that I've been involved with? What was good about their culture? What would I want to try and imitate? And what did I absolutely hate about corporate culture? So what did I really want to avoid? And I did give it some thought as to what are the values of the company? What do we represent? What sort of people do I want? And how do we want to behave? You know, what are our principles? And certainly 20 years at Mars sort of taught me about, you know, the 5 principles of Mars. Anyone who's worked in Mars will be able to tell you what the 5 principles are. And it's almost like it's not a cult. But it's really, you know, this is who we are. This is our DNA. We belong to this company because we share the same values and principles. And so I did think about that a lot with V2. I haven't really done that work much with Algenie yet, because actually it's just so focused on the delivery of our milestones. You know, can we get to this cost per kilo? Can we scale to gigatons? That it's kind of like that's our principle. Is like, what do we need to do this as fast as possible? But I need to be a bit careful because we're still a company. We're forming a company. We need to do a bit more work to think, okay, what sort of company are we? What's the sort of people we want to attract? And what are the principles of the company? Because with any luck, the company will live long after me. and it will thrive if it kind of has the right DNA, and you do that as a founder quite early in the piece. So what do we stand for? What sort of people would we want to come to this company and share our values?
Yeah.
So work in progress. Haven't fixed it completely yet.
I love that. And if there's a young person listening to this, what advice would you give to them?
A young person listening to this, what advice? I don't know. It all depends. I mean, look, I hesitate. I think it's really hard to be a young person now because you're in an absolute, shitstorm of disinformation, information, chaos. How do you know what direction to choose for your life? And I'm the worst person to give career advice because I've been all over the place. I've no idea why I made most of the choices I made in my life have been pretty random. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Figure out what you care about, what do you think's useful, and try and find something that you enjoy doing that is useful. I think that's the thing that's kind of guided me.
Maybe I'll ask that question in a different way. I mean, you're also doing some teaching, right?
Yeah.
So please share, what are you trying to achieve with that teaching? What's your objective?
So I worked on Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation at UTS, and to be honest, the objective of teaching, I don't think I'm a great teacher particularly, but the first objective was actually I was curious to know, well, how do you innovate? I've been trying to do it for 30 years. I learned a few things, but in teaching, I was learning. So I was actually, my job was to learn and then to teach, and actually to learn and teach at the same time. So a lot of innovation teaching is kind of it's kind of learning and teaching at the same time. So you open it up to the students and you get lots of different opinions and you talk about stuff and you work on it together. So that was very much the style of teaching for BCII. Very unusual as a university degree. It's not like you have a lecturer up front and say, well, I know how to do it. This is how you do it. Because anybody who proclaims they know how to innovate it's lying. There isn't a, there's some things you shouldn't do. I mean, you've got to be open and you've got to be curious and you've got to be, there's a few things that'll help you. But it's the question about career, and that was often asked to me. So how do I map my career going forward? I think in today's world, given the incredible amount of change, you just have to be open.
Yeah.
It's like the speed at which things are changing, the speed of AI, the speed of biotech, the complexity of the world. Everything is crazy at the moment. So welcome to crazy land. Move with the flow.
Yeah.
Identify things that kind of seem to make sense and go with it. Go fast because things are moving very fast, and be prepared to pivot lots of times because there's no 40-year career anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I don't know whether that's a very hopeful thing, but it is kind of the reality.
To adapt.
I mean, especially with artificial intelligence, like a lot of research that you're doing probably help you.
Oh God, I reckon to do what we've done with 5 or 6 people, I would have needed 50 if I hadn't used AI for everything. So, I think some of the code that we've got in some of our algorithms is not the best code in the world, but it only took us 2 hours to write it. So, it's like the speed at which we can operate. I use AI for everything. Apart from the things that I write, which I publish, which I actually have to write them because AI is good, but there's something slightly tinny about what comes out of
authentic.
It's not quite right, and it doesn't make typos like I make. So everyone knows that it's not me.
Isn't that funny? Like even now typos, it's actually got a value in it.
Well, actually, it's funny because we're obviously teaching our AIs about our style, and we're doing that as well, and I did get a typo back from Claude. So it's obviously learned.
It's learning.
It's obviously learned my terrible thumbs.
But Nick, if you start again, like now, as a young Nick, would you do it in a differently?
I have no idea. As I say, yes, of course, because it was pretty random to start with,
Yeah.
and so of course the route will be very different.
Yeah.
What I do say though, and it's kind of interesting because I'm sitting in a startup incubator and I'm looking around and everyone's like 21 or something,
Yeah.
and I'm 60. And my first startup was when I was 54 or something, and it does actually help to know something,
Yeah.
and to have a network, and so of course, if you're 21, you got an idea, pursue it and stuff. But equally, I would say to somebody who's actually had a successful career, has got a network, really is still curious, they're still learning, and they're still healthy enough to give it a go, because
Yeah.
doing a startup is pretty bloody hard work.
Yeah.
You know, people who are a little bit older should give it a go as well, because they have the advantage of, you know,
Yeah.
they've learned something. They
experience.
probably know an industry really well, you know,
Yeah.
they know what
Yeah.
their ideas, they can kind of test those ideas, whereas a 21-year-old has got no idea
Yeah.
about anything.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
I'm quite glad that I did my entrepreneurial journey later in life.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Life's
Yeah.
random.
Yeah.
I would never discourage
Yeah.
somebody giving it a go, but give it a go whatever age you are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And I suppose, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
I want to have done something useful. It's a theme.
Yeah.
The things that I'm proud of are things that have done something useful. And useful is not, I mean, you could say it's all about sustainability. It's not. I think having a really delicious potato chip, it's like, that's
And
useful.
me-
It gives joy. I mean, what are you got to do? Useful means it's either good for the planet, it's good for humanity, or it gives joy.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love
You know, it's like if you can do something in those spaces, then that's a life well lived. But look, you know, it's not everybody has to solve
Yeah.
big problems. There's, you know, in have a life well lived, and that can be done in a hundred ways.
Yeah. And I suppose looking back on this journey, and given your definition of success was largely around doing useful things, do you feel successful?
No, I'm in the middle of a startup. So you never feel successful when you're in the middle of a startup. You feel terrible that you're
Yeah.
going behind and you haven't hit your milestones, and you got to do,
Yeah.
you know, it's like
Yeah.
the whole thing about doing a startup is deep dissatisfaction all the time, internally, and then externally, complete confidence and everything. So it's kind of, you have this absolute Jekyll and Hyde. Inside, you're burning up because you're not going as fast as you can, and you want to go faster, and it's like, this thing didn't work, what do we do the next thing? But of course, externally, you're just you're cruising ahead and hitting your milestones.
Everything's good.
And it's both. It's both.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the joy and the terror of doing a startup.
Well, Nick, this has been an incredible conversation. Honestly, I could talk to you for hours on end, but I know you're a busy man. So I'd like to wrap this up. Throughout our conversation, I've been trying to jot down some of the core traits which I think have built, for me at least, what I think is quite a successful life. The first one is you're innately curious. And, you know, that's shown up in your early years, and then even now, you're always asking why, how, you know, these very deep diving questions. And I can tell your brain is wired that way to be innately curious and try and learn about things. And I think that's led to the second one, which is you're incredibly knowledgeable about different fields. Like in our discussion, you know, we've talked about snacks, we've talked about algae, we've talked about food. Like, you know, your knowledge extends across an array of things, and it's really fascinating to hear, you know, some of the research in, you know, the work that you're doing. The next one is you're very values or purpose driven. You know, when you were talking about, you know, one of the reasons that you left Mars and went to Pepsi was that purpose. And, you know, even in what you're working now, you're all the challenges you're trying to solve, it's purpose driven, trying to solve some of, you know, the world's biggest problems, and, you know, you live with purpose. And I think that's goes to the last one, which is you love to solve the hardest problems.
Still an engineer.
Yeah, you're an engineer at heart. You know, the problems that you've picked are, you know, some of the hardest challenges out there, and I think that really goes to your character about, you know,
Curiosity.
and just really wanting to deep dive into the tough challenges and try and find a solution to them.
Yeah, and also to add to that list, Nick, you're continuous learner. Like you're always looking at opportunity to continuously learning and growing yourself. This is what we see, going through your journey, and it's a fascinating discussion. I learned quite a lot, which I never even thought of. Eating meat is not good for the environment. So this is something new for me. So just imagine there's so many people, ignorance people in this world, right? Like so the message need to be really communicated, and because we both love meat, but I used to be a vegetarian for 13 years. I given up because when I came to Australia, I didn't have a choice. I had to eat meat because, as you said,
That's right. Yeah.
this is what we do.
There's no alternative. Well, now you can eat V2. It's good. You can eat V2 food and look, eat less meat. I mean, it's not. Again, it's not. It's you don't have to become a vegan. But
But thank you so much for the chat. Really enjoyed it. And
And Nick, if people want to find out more about what you're doing at Algenie, what's the best place for them to?
I think if you just Google either my name or Google Algenie, we're quite open about what we're doing because we think we have such strong IP that we're sharing. And to be honest, we're not going to hold on to this and polish our idea for the next 20 years and do nothing. We're getting it out there. This thing has to happen as quickly as possible. So very happy to share as much as we can.
Yeah, and we'll put the link down below. And for those of you who have taken away something from today's episode, it would mean the world if you could like and subscribe so we can get our message out to more and more people. And if you want to see more of our inspirational content, you can check out all of our episodes over on our website, thequestforsuccesspodcast.com. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.